Staying organized is really important when keeping as many animals as I do. It helps streamline the process and makes it easy and relatively quick to care for everything. And with that in mind, one of the areas that I wanted to include in the new space here is a proper utility closet that also doubles as the quarantine area. I won't cover everything about it in this video, but I've been painstakingly working on it, and I'm really excited to share with you what I've done so far. Aside from the ceiling and proper lighting, which unfortunately we're not going to address in this video, everything in this room is ready to go. I got the trim taken care of, the doors, I've got the walls painted, all of the electric taken care of, and it's just a matter of putting all of the components into this room that I need to be in here. I want to include a few very specific things in here, and to better illustrate that and to properly utilize this space, I made a diagram on my computer. It probably goes without saying that I wanted to include the metal rack that I had in the previous quarantine room, but I want to include a second one so that I have more room to put stuff. I also got a little dedicated fridge that I could keep frozen food, worms, and other things in that I'll be using here in the animal room. And lastly, something that I didn't originally plan to include in this space, but as I thought through things, I thought it would be really awesome to put some kitchen cabinets in here. Now before I can get any of this into this space, I actually have to address something with the cabinets. I want them to sit flush up against the wall, and there are two ways that I could do this. I could either remove the trim or cut out a section of the back of the cabinet. I think I'd prefer to do that because if I want to move things around someday, I don't want to have to redo the trim or anything like that, so this way I can keep it all intact. So that's exactly what I did. I accounted for the trim and cut off the appropriate sections. This adjustment allowed the cabinets to fit perfectly against the wall. That said, to ensure it all remains stable, I installed 2x4s in the back to replace the removed sections. You'll see here that the trim on the side also stops the cabinet from lining up with the wall. In addition to this, it wouldn't be ideal to have the drawers so close to it. Luckily, adding a spacer board on the side allowed me to easily extend it out accordingly. Time to paint. I decided on satin black to create a sophisticated look. I rolled 3 coats onto the faces of the cabinets, let it dry, and went on to install them in the room. I shimmed them from the back and bottom as needed to level it out. To properly and easily align the upper cabinets, I set up a laser level and marked for the height with tape. I secured the first to studs within the wall, so it's all very stable. As I added the subsequent cabinets, I repeated this and locked them together on the fronts. Before I installed this large pantry cabinet, I wanted to see how it fit. It looked good, but since it's unfinished, I had to add side panels. I simply cut out some 1/4-inch thick plywood to the appropriate sizes that I glued and nailed to the side. After the glue dried, I went back and painted it. I also painted the cabinet and drawer doors. Once everything dried, I applied polyurethane to protect the surfaces. Now I was finally able to reinstall the face pieces and put it all in the cabinets. At this point, I was really excited because the look was coming full circle. I added cabinet bumpers to the drawers and doors as well. Now, as I explained, I want to include the mini fridge, and as you can see here on the diagram, I accounted for a little alcove above it. I custom made this earlier to match everything else and to fit perfectly above the fridge. It took some finessing to get it properly aligned, but it really tied everything together. Cabinets aren't complete without hardware though, and these further tied into the look. I used a jig for consistency, drilled the holes, and attached them accordingly. I added the shelves as well. As I'm sure you can imagine, this needs a countertop, so I went and cut out a butcher block. I wanted to remain light to contrast with everything else, so I just sealed it with polyurethane. Once dry, I slid it into place and secured it from underneath with a few L brackets. There was a slight gap around the outside though, so I filled it with black silicone to seal it off. Now I was finally able to add the fridge, and I loved the result. I know it will be really convenient to have this in the animal room instead of trekking out into the garage. I just have to get it covered in some magnets so it's less sterile and has character. Another feature I thought would take this to the next level is a pegboard backsplash. I installed this above the butcher block accordingly. Although I don't have much to put on it now, I can imagine it full of various items I regularly use in the animal room. It was also great to fill in the cabinets. To have a dedicated space for everything is really exciting, and that's why I went through the trouble to build something this elaborate in a storage closet of all spaces. More on all of that later. In the meantime, let's get those racks installed. These racks are pretty easy to install and a great option for spaces that need to be modular. It's just a matter of ensuring it's all properly lined up and fully locked together. When I set up the rack at the old house, I cut out pieces of plywood to sit on top of the wire. This provides a better surface for tanks to sit on. Obviously I'm going to use them again, but the only thing is that they're not nearly as clean as they used to be. A quick coat of paint will fix that. Alright, so I've got the first rack completely installed along with a fresh coat of paint on the ones down below, and I think it's looking pretty awesome if you ask me. I have a slight issue though, and I noticed it whenever I was assembling it. The design on this must have changed since I bought the last one over a year ago, and unfortunately it cannot link up with the previous one. Now I could have just put the old one to the left of it, but it's actually about a foot taller than this one, and it kind of looks weird, so I want everything to look cohesive and clean and all of that, and I actually need a rack for up in my garage, so I might as well just take that one back up there and get another one of these. As I showed in the diagram earlier but didn't mention, I'll put the RO water drums on the bottom of the left rack. I pulled one over and used it to account for the appropriate height of the bottom shelf. Then I continued assembling it all as before. The room is looking even better and the racks fit perfectly. I'm not stopping here though, back to the RO drums. I have to get a third for fresh water since both of these are now for salt water. I'll also hook up a flow valve to each as an added failsafe to ensure I don't accidentally overflow the drums. However, in the event that all else fails, I also have a water sensor. If any water leaks out onto the floor, this is going to let me know before it becomes a serious issue. Anyway, to install the unit itself, I secured a board that I painted black to the side of the rack with a few screws. Then I mounted it onto this. Originally I planned to put it under the sink, but I wanted it to be in a more accessible location for the ease of replacing cartridges. I'll hook it up to the water and drums later because I still have to work out a few details and add the drop ceiling. That said, instead of hooking it up to the faucet, I actually have it tied directly into the plumbing, so I can use the sink as normal even if I'm filling the drums. On the shelves above this is where I'll house my isopods. I'm really excited to finally get them back into a proper location. That said, I'll likely downsize here at some point to make room for other things, but that means I have to build some vivariums to put these in. More on that another time. Also, I should probably mention that I did a whole video about them a few months back if you'd like to see more about these bins. Now onto the right side, which is where the aquariums and plant bins will go. Before adding them, I'll address lighting. For the aquariums, I'm using these linking LED strip lights, which fit perfectly above the entirety of the shelf. I stuck them to the underside with double-sided tape for proper placement and further secured them with wires. Then I cleaned up the tanks and put them in place. Moving down to the plant shelf, I use these full spectrum grow lights. I found them on clearance for $12 at Home Depot, and I figured I should give them a try. I attached them to the underside of the shelf like before. And to finish it off, I put the bins in place. I was ready to call it quits, but I noticed the stand had some wobble to it, so I proceeded to anchor it to the wall. I painted a 2x4 to blend in with the green. This fits perfectly behind the rack, along with a few shims. I secured it to the studs, and then I locked the rack into it. This made a huge difference. And that's where I'm at now. I've done the bulk of the work so far, but there's still a little bit of fine tuning to do, and I haven't even brought everything in here yet. For example, until I add the drop ceiling, I can't finish the RO or air systems. I have a linear piston air pump that I'll use to power sponge filters in the aquariums, but I don't know how to best run the lines without having the ceiling tiles in. And that's also when I'm going to get some proper lighting in here, which is desperately needed. While we're talking about lighting, you'll see that I also added a light right above the counter. Back to the aquariums though. In the previous room, I had them all hooked up to a drain system that made them really easy to maintain. I'll do that again here, but I need to get a few things to do it properly. Like I said, I want to scale back on the isopods a little bit and really just keep them dedicated to this spot here so they're not spilling over onto this shelf here. What I want to do up here is add a few vivariums and saltwater things, but we'll talk about that in a future video. Obviously I've done a lot, but I'm just getting started in this room alone. That said, it should give you a better idea of what you can expect to see out in the main area. And I'm so excited to share that all with you, but that's all for now. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me. Until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.